Movies and TV shows have made Tudor England look like a never-ending parade of elaborate feasts, gorgeous costumes, and romantic courtly love. But here's what Hollywood never shows you. Most Tudors spent their days knee-deep in human waste, terrified of being accused of witchcraft and sleeping alongside lice in beds that could literally kill them. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, let's head back to Tudor England. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. So, congratulations. You just woke up in a small Tudor cottage in the year 1540. The first thing you notice isn't the birdsong outside or the morning light. It's the smell. Your nostrils burn with the acrid tang of wood smoke from the dying fire in the centre of the room. The smoke hasn't fully escaped through the hole in the thatched roof, and it hangs in the air, stinging your eyes. You're not in a bed, not really. You're lying on a straw-filled sack placed on top of a wooden platform. The mattress is lumpy and damp from the night's condensation. Your back aches from the uneven surface. Unlike modern beds with their springs and memory foam, your Tudor sleeping arrangement is basically a bag of dried grass held up by ropes strung across a wooden frame. This is why Tudors would say, sleep tight, because those ropes needed regular tightening to prevent you from sagging right through to the floor during the night. You're not alone, either. Your body is pressed against several others, perhaps family members, perhaps servants, perhaps both. Privacy doesn't exist here. Everyone sleeps communally, and you're all sharing your bed with uninvited guests, tiny biting insects that live in the straw. You can feel them now, the little itches across your skin. Fleas and lice are just part of daily life. The good news is you're not sleeping on the floor like some of the poorer folk. That would put you at risk of rats running across your face in the night. The bad news is you're still not safe from rodents. They can climb. You sit up and reach for your clothes, which are hanging on a peg nearby. They're the same clothes you wore yesterday and the day before that. In Tudor England, most people own exactly one outfit. You might have a second, better set for church on Sundays, but that's it. The linen undergarments get washed occasionally, but the wool outer clothes, almost never. They're just brushed clean and aired out. As you pull on your scratchy woolen clothing, your stomach growls. But first, you need to relieve yourself. There's no bathroom, of course. If you're lucky, there might be a chamber pot. If not, there's always the midden heap outside, or, for men, the nearest wall. The concept of sewage disposal is still in its infancy. In larger towns like London, the waste runs down open gutters in the middle of the streets. You're hungry now. Breakfast, if you're fortunate enough to have it, is simple. A piece of bread and perhaps some ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. Water is considered dangerous to drink, and with good reason. It's often contaminated with human waste and can make you violently ill. The alcohol in ale kills some of the bacteria, making it safer. Even children drink it. The bread is tough and coarse, nothing like the soft white loaves of today. It's made from a mixture of rye and wheat, what Tudors called carter's bread, the cheapest available. If you're wealthier, you might enjoy yeoman's bread made of wholemeal. Only the richest eat manchet, made of fine white flour. You step outside your small home. If you're living in a rural area, and most people are, as 90% of the population still lives in the countryside, you'll immediately be greeted by farm animals. Chickens peck at the dirt around your feet. A pig might be rooting through scraps near your door. The animals provide food and income, but they also create more filth and smell. The morning is chilly, but you barely notice. Tudor England is in the grip of what historians now call the Little Ice Age. Winters are brutally cold, with the Thames sometimes freezing solid enough for frost fairs to be held on the ice. But you're used to it. Central heating won't be invented for centuries, and your only warmth comes from the fire and your layers of clothing. Your day is about to begin in earnest, and it will be a long one. The Tudor workday follows the sun, starting at dawn and ending at dusk. In summer, that could mean 15 hours of labour. In winter, the days are mercifully shorter, but then you're contending with the bitter cold. If you're a farmer, you'll spend your day ploughing, planting, harvesting, or tending to livestock, depending on the season. The work is backbreaking. Everything is done by hand or with the help of animals. There are no machines to lighten your load. If you're a tradesperson, perhaps a blacksmith, a carpenter, or a tanner, you'll work from a small shop, often attached to your home. The smell of your trade permeates everything. Tanners, who turn animal hides into leather, are particularly notorious. The process involves urine and animal dung, creating such a stench that tanneries are usually located on the outskirts of towns. Women's work is no less demanding. You might be spinning wool, brewing ale, baking bread, preserving food, tending the garden, caring for children, and managing the household. You're expected to be skilled in herbalism too, creating remedies for common ailments. The morning passes quickly with work. By midday, your stomach is growling again. The main meal of the day, dinner, is served around 11 or 12. If you're an ordinary working person, it might be pottage, a thick soup made of whatever vegetables are in season, perhaps with some barley or oats to thicken it. If you're lucky, there might be a small piece of bacon or salt beef added for flavour. The wealthy eat far better. Multiple courses of meat, fish, game, and fowl. Henry VIII, now on the throne, is known for his extravagant appetite. His court consumes vast quantities of beef, venison, and wild boar. But you're not at court. You're eating your pottage with a wooden spoon, sopping up the liquid with a chunk of that tough bread. After the midday meal, it's back to work. The afternoon stretches long, especially in summer. Your muscles ache, but there's no rest until the tasks are done. Labour is the rhythm of Tudor life. As the sun begins to set, you might take another meal, supper, though it's typically lighter than dinner. More bread, perhaps some cheese or cold leftovers from midday. If you're in a town, you might hear the church bells ringing, marking the hour. Timekeeping is still imprecise for most people. You live by the sun and the seasons, not by minutes and seconds. But here's something that might surprise you about Tudor sleep habits. Unlike modern people who generally sleep through the night, Tudors often practiced what historians now call segmented sleep. You would sleep for about 4 hours, first sleep, then wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night. During this wakeful period, you might pray, chat quietly with family members, or even visit neighbours. Then you would return to second sleep until dawn. As darkness falls completely, you prepare for bed. Candles and rushlights, reeds dipped in animal fat, are expensive, so most ordinary people simply go to sleep when it gets dark. Only the wealthy can afford to stay up late reading or socialising by candlelight. Before sleeping, though, there are prayers to be said. Religion dominates Tudor life, structuring your days and weeks. During the reign of Henry VIII, England is undergoing a religious revolution. The king has broken with Rome and established himself as the head of the Church of England. This has profound implications for everyone. Monasteries are being dissolved, religious practices are changing, and expressing the wrong religious views can be dangerous. Speaking of danger, there's one more thing you need to worry about before sleeping: fire. With open flames for heating and cooking and timber-framed buildings with thatched roofs, fires are a constant hazard. A stray spark can set an entire house ablaze in minutes, and from there an entire town can burn. Many Tudors die in house fires, especially in winter when fires burn constantly for warmth. You check that the embers in the fire are banked safely, then climb back onto your rope-strung bed with its lumpy straw mattress. Others join you. Again, no privacy here. The room is dark except for perhaps a bit of moonlight filtering through the shutters. As you lie there, other worries might fill your mind. Disease is rampant in Tudor England. The plague still strikes periodically, killing vast numbers. Smallpox, typhus, and sweating sickness claim many lives too. That mysterious sweating sickness is particularly feared. It can kill within hours of the first symptoms appearing. No one knows what causes it. Modern historians think it might have been a form of hantavirus, but it's terrifying enough that even King Henry flees London when outbreaks occur. There's also the ever-present fear of famine. A bad harvest can mean starvation for many. The years 1527-1528 saw terrible harvests and widespread hunger. The same happened in the 1550s during Mary I's reign, and again in the 1590s under Elizabeth I. But perhaps the most insidious fear is that of being accused of witchcraft. Although the great witch hunts won't reach their peak until after the Tudor period, the foundations are being laid. In 1542, Henry VIII passed the first Witchcraft Act, making witchcraft a capital offence. If your neighbours decide you've caused their cow to stop giving milk or their child to fall ill, you could find yourself in serious trouble. And it doesn't take much to be suspected. Are you an older woman living alone? Do you know a bit too much about herbs and remedies? Are you outspoken or different in some way? These could all mark you as a potential witch. Take the case of poor Elizabeth Brown, a servant in a wealthy household. She was simply warming herself by the fire when the rope holding a large slab of bacon in the chimney broke. The heavy bacon fell and crushed her. She died 4 days later. Today, we'd call it a tragic accident. In Tudor times, some might have wondered if witchcraft was involved. Who cut that rope? Was someone jealous of Elizabeth? Or consider John Townsend, a labourer working on a church clock tower in 1513. He was carrying the clock mechanism down when it slipped from his hands and fell, striking a young boy named William Brett on the head. William died the next day. Again, a terrible accident. But in a world where people are looking for supernatural explanations, such events can spark dangerous rumours. You pull the thin woolen blanket up to your chin and try to get comfortable on the lumpy straw. The person next to you shifts, jostling your arm. Somewhere in the darkness, someone coughs. Outside, an owl hoots, and you remember the old folks saying that an owl's call presages death. You cross yourself instinctively, a habit deeply ingrained despite the religious changes sweeping through England. Your eyes grow heavy as exhaustion overtakes you. Tomorrow will be another day of hard work, simple food, and the countless dangers of Tudor life. But for now, sleep comes. Your first sleep, at least. You'll wake again in a few hours, as Tudors always do, before drifting off once more until dawn. In the next room, a child whimpers in their sleep. The timbers of the house creak as they settle. The smoke from the banked fire still hangs in the air, familiar and comforting despite its harshness. This is life in Tudor England. Hard, dirty, dangerous, but also the only life you've ever known. You're just beginning to drift off when you hear a sound that makes your blood run cold. The distinctive, ominous rattle in someone's throat. It's coming from the elderly grandmother who shares your home. That sound is all too familiar in Tudor times. It's the sound of approaching death. The death rattle, they call it. The old woman has been ailing for weeks with a persistent cough and fever. In the Tudor world, there's little that can be done for such illnesses. There are herbal remedies, honey and herbs for the cough perhaps, but no antibiotics, no hospitals as we know them. Many illnesses that are easily treatable today were death sentences then. Tomorrow you might need to fetch the local wise woman who knows the healing properties of plants, but you're aware that this same knowledge that might heal could also lead to accusations of witchcraft if things go wrong. It's a precarious balance. The old woman's breathing steadies and the rattling stops for now. You close your eyes again, trying to find sleep despite the worries crowding your mind. Life is precarious in Tudor England. Death is an everyday companion, not a distant stranger. But for now, you're alive. You've survived another day in one of history's most challenging eras. As you finally drift off to sleep, the smoke from the fire, the scratchy wool blanket, the hard straw beneath you, the sounds of breathing all around. These discomforts fade into the background. They're simply part of being Tudor. This is normal. This is life. In the darkness, as your first sleep takes hold, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. More hard work, certainly. Perhaps joy, perhaps sorrow, but most likely just another day of survival in a world where simply staying alive is an achievement worthy of respect. The pale light of dawn filters through the shutters. You've survived the night, and honestly, that's no small achievement in Tudor England. You rise with the sun, as does everyone around you. The old grandmother who rattled in her sleep has made it through the night too, though she looks weaker than yesterday. The harsh reality is that in this era, illness is often a slow march toward death. Without modern medicine, each recovery feels like a small miracle. You splash your face with cold water from a basin. No hot shower this morning, or any morning for that matter. Bathing in Tudor England is a complicated affair. Despite what you might have heard, Tudors weren't universally filthy. They did care about cleanliness, just in a different way than we do now. Instead of bathing their entire bodies regularly, most Tudors practice what we might call spot cleaning. They wash their hands and face daily and change their linen undergarments frequently. The linen actually helps keep them clean. It draws oil and sweat away from the skin. Their outer clothes, made of wool and other materials, are rarely washed, but instead are brushed and aired out. Full immersion baths are rare and sometimes considered dangerous. There's a common belief that opening the pores through bathing can allow disease to enter the body. This isn't entirely irrational given their understanding of medicine. They don't know about germs, but they do observe that people sometimes fall ill after bathing. The wealthy might have proper baths occasionally. Henry VIII has elaborate bathing facilities at Hampton Court Palace, with water carried through lead pipes. But for ordinary folks like you, bathing means standing in a wooden tub and sponging yourself off, assuming you can spare the firewood to heat the water. You run a damp cloth over your face and hands, which is the extent of most daily Tudor hygiene. Your teeth, you might rub them with a cloth, perhaps with a bit of salt as an abrasive. Toothbrushes as we know them won't be common for another couple of centuries. Many Tudors have terrible teeth, especially the wealthy who can afford sugar. Elizabeth I's teeth are famously blackened from her sweet tooth. After this minimal morning routine, it's time for breakfast, if you get one at all. Breakfast isn't a given for everyone in Tudor times. Many people, especially the nobility, skip it entirely and wait for their main meal around midday. But working folks like farmers and labourers often need the energy to start their day. Your breakfast is simple. A chunk of bread, perhaps with a bit of butter if you're fortunate, and a mug of small beer or ale. This beer isn't particularly strong. It's more like a slightly fermented grain beverage with just enough alcohol to make it safer than water. As you chew the dense, coarse bread, you can feel the grit in it. Tudor flour is stone ground and often contains bits of the millstone as well as other impurities. This constant abrasion wears down your teeth over time, contributing to dental problems. After breakfast, you step outside into the Tudor world. If you're in London or another sizable town, the streets are already bustling. Apprentices are opening shops, market sellers are setting up their stalls, and labourers are heading to work. The roads are narrow, unpaved, and filthy. In many towns, there's an open sewer running down the middle of the street, a channel that locals call the kennel. When it rains, these channels overflow, turning the streets into rivers of waste. The smell hits you immediately. Human and animal waste, rotting food, and the distinctive odours of various trades all mingle in the air. Tanners use urine and dog feces in their leather-making process. Butchers toss unwanted animal parts into the street. Chamber pots are emptied from upper windows, with only a cursory warning shout of "Gardez-le" from the French "Gardez-l'eau," or "Watch out for the water." But here's something that might surprise you. Most Tudors don't notice the smell much. It's just the background of their lives, and their noses are accustomed to it. What they do worry about is miasma, bad air that they believe carries disease. This theory isn't entirely wrong. The foul air often does coincide with areas of disease, though not for the reasons they think. To combat these dangerous smells, many Tudors carry pomanders, perforated balls filled with sweet-smelling herbs and spices. The wealthy might have elaborate gold or silver pomanders, while ordinary folks make do with a small cloth bag of herbs. The herbs aren't just for masking odours. Many of them, like rosemary and lavender, do have antibacterial properties. If you're in a rural area rather than a town, your morning view is different but no less busy. Fields stretch out around the village, divided into strips rather than the enclosed fields of later centuries. This is the open field system, where each family farms several scattered strips rather than one consolidated plot. It's inefficient by modern standards, but provides some insurance against localized crop failures. As you start your day's work, the dangers of Tudor life are all around you. If you're a farmer, there's the risk of injury from tools or draft animals. A kick from a horse or ox could be fatal. If you're working in construction, falls are a constant hazard. In manufactories or workshops, accidents with tools and machinery claim many lives. Let's say you're a farmer heading out to your field strips. You carry your tools over your shoulder, perhaps a wooden plough if you're fortunate enough to own one, or simpler hand tools if not. The walk might be long, as the strips are scattered around the common fields. The work is back-breaking. Ploughing means walking behind a heavy wooden plough, trying to keep it cutting straight furrows in the soil. If you're wealthy enough to own an ox or horse to pull it, that makes the work somewhat easier, but you still need to control the animal and the plough simultaneously. Planting is done by broadcasting, scattering seed by hand across the ploughed soil. It's inefficient, with much of the seed lost to birds or uneven distribution, but it's the only method available. Later, you'll need to weed the growing crops by hand, bent over for hours under the sun. Harvest time is the busiest and most dangerous. Working with scythes and sickles leads to frequent cuts, which can easily become infected in an era before antibiotics. The pressure to bring in the harvest before rain ruins it means working from dawn until dusk without rest. Dehydration and heat exhaustion claim many lives during harvest seasons. And after all this work, the yields are pitifully small by modern standards. A good wheat harvest might return only 3 or 4 times the seed planted. A bad one might barely return what was sown. This thin margin between subsistence and starvation explains the terror that bad weather brings to Tudor communities. Mid-morning you pause briefly for a small snack, perhaps an apple if it's the right season, or another piece of bread. Then it's back to work until the main meal of the day. Around 11 or 12, you return home or to a designated eating place for dinner, the largest meal of the Tudor day. For ordinary folks, this is still simple fare: more pottage, that ever-present thick soup, bread, perhaps some cheese, and seasonal vegetables from the garden. Meat is a luxury for most. reserved for special occasions or as a flavouring rather than a main dish. What's in your pottage depends on the season and your resources. In spring, it might contain young peas and beans, onions and fresh herbs. In summer, more vegetables join the pot. Autumn brings root vegetables and fruits. Winter pottage relies heavily on dried peas, beans, and whatever root vegetables could be stored. The cooking is done over an open fire, with the pot hanging from a hook or sitting on a trivet above the flames. Temperature control is imprecise at best, and cooking is a skilled art. Many meals are burned or undercooked, adding to the challenges of Tudor nutrition. After the midday meal, it's back to work until evening. The Tudor workday is long, essentially all the daylight hours, which means summer days are exhausting. There are no weekends as we know them, though Sunday is reserved for church attendance. Other religious holidays provide additional breaks from labour, though Henry VIII's religious reforms have reduced the number of such holidays. As the afternoon wears on, you feel the fatigue in your muscles. Tudor work is physically demanding in ways that few modern jobs are. There are no machines to help with lifting, digging, pounding, or carrying. Everything is done by human or animal power. This constant physical labour shapes Tudor bodies. Most people are lean and muscular from necessity, though not necessarily healthy by modern standards. Nutritional deficiencies are common, especially in winter and early spring when fresh food is scarce. Rickets caused by vitamin D deficiency leaves many with bowed legs. Scurvy from lack of vitamin C is common in winter months. Let's say it's now summer in your Tudor life. The days are long, hot, and filled with work, but summer brings its own dangers beyond just exhaustion. Diseases spread more rapidly in warm weather. Dysentery, the bloody flux as Tudors call it, is particularly common and deadly. It causes severe diarrhea, often with blood, leading to fatal dehydration. Thomas Wolsey, Henry VIII's powerful cardinal, died of dysentery while under arrest in 1530. Food poisoning is another summer hazard. Without refrigeration, meat and fish spoil quickly. Most is preserved through salting or smoking, but fresh food in summer is always risky. Tudor cooks know to be wary of certain foods, but they don't understand bacteria or food safety as we do. There's also the danger of the mysterious sweating sickness that periodically sweeps through England during the Tudor period. It first appeared in 1485 and had several deadly outbreaks before disappearing around 1551. The disease is terrifying because it strikes so swiftly. People can be healthy in the morning and dead by evening. Symptoms include sudden onset of fever, profuse sweating, headache, and extreme exhaustion, followed by death within hours for many victims. The sweating sickness particularly frightens Henry VIII, who flees London during outbreaks, moving his court from place to place to escape infection. Anne Boleyn survives a bout with it in 1528, but many at court, including Cardinal Wolsey's household, lose members to the disease. Another summer danger is drowning. It might surprise you to learn that drowning accounts for almost half of all accidental deaths in Tudor England. Rivers and ponds are essential for daily life, for washing, for water, for cooking and cleaning, for transportation. But they're deadly. Most people can't swim, and even those who can may struggle in the heavy wool clothing that Tudors wear. A common drowning scenario involves women fetching water or washing clothes at the river's edge. The banks are slippery, especially after rain, and a fall into deep water often proves fatal. Men drown while fishing, crossing rivers, or travelling by boat. Children drown in alarming numbers, falling into ponds, wells, or streams while playing or helping with chores. One particularly sad case from Tudor records tells of Dorothy Cawthorne, a maidservant who went to fetch water from a pond. She slipped, fell in, and drowned. The inquest noted that she had tried to break through the wall near the pond to escape, but couldn't make a large enough hole. By late afternoon, your workday is finally approaching its end. The sun is lower in the sky and your body aches from the day's labour. You might take another small meal around 5 or 6, what Tudors call supper. This is typically lighter than dinner, perhaps bread and cheese or leftover pottage from midday. After supper comes what little leisure time Tudor life allows. This varies greatly depending on your social status and the season. In summer, there might be village games or dancing on the green. In winter, families gather around the fire for storytelling, simple crafts, or just conversation. For the wealthy, leisure might include music, chess or other board games, hunting, a particular passion of Henry VIII, or reading. For ordinary folks, pleasures are simpler, perhaps a mug of ale at the local alehouse, gossip with neighbours, or singing traditional songs. Religion structures much of Tudor leisure time as well. Evening prayers are part of daily life, and religious festivals punctuate the year. May Day, Midsummer, Harvest Home, Christmas, and Easter are major celebrations that break up the routine of work. But even leisure carries dangers in Tudor England. Sports are often violent and unregulated. Football, not modern soccer but a rough ancestor of it, frequently results in serious injuries. There are no fixed rules, no limit on the number of players, and precious little concern for safety. Games often end with broken bones or worse. Wrestling, another popular sport, leads to similar injuries, and then there's bear baiting and bull baiting, blood sports where dogs are set against a chained bear or bull. These spectacles are beloved by Tudors of all classes, including the royal court, but are deadly dangerous for participants and, occasionally, for spectators when animals break free. Dancing, a more civilised pastime, still has its hazards. Tudor dances are energetic and sometimes performed near fires for light and warmth. Records show numerous cases of dancers, particularly women in long dresses, getting too close to flames and suffering severe burns, or even death when their clothing ignites. As evening deepens into night, you prepare once again for sleep. The fire is banked to keep embers alive until morning. Starting a new fire is difficult and time-consuming, so maintaining one is important. Shutters are closed against the night air, which many believe carries disease. You might say prayers before bed, especially if you have children. Religion is woven into every aspect of Tudor life, and evening prayers are as routine as breathing. The specific prayers might have changed with Henry VIII's religious reforms, but the practice remains. Then it's back to that rope-strung bed with its straw mattress. In summer, the heat can make the small enclosed house stifling. The straw might be alive with insects. In winter, the cold seeps through walls and around window frames, and you pile on whatever coverings you have. Woolen blankets, old cloaks, anything to keep warm. You lie down alongside family members, perhaps servants too. The old grandmother's breathing seems more laboured tonight. You wonder if you should send for the local wise woman in the morning, risking both the expense and the potential for gossip about witchcraft. Medicine and superstition are thoroughly intertwined in Tudor thinking. Outside, an owl calls again. Inside, the fire pops as a pocket of sap explodes in the heat. Someone coughs in their sleep. These are the sounds of Tudor night, as familiar to you as traffic or air conditioning might be to a modern person. As you drift toward your first sleep, your mind might turn to the wider world beyond your immediate experience. Henry VIII has been king for over 30 years now. His break with Rome, his multiple marriages, his dissolution of the monasteries, these have transformed England in ways that affect even the humblest subjects. The dissolution of the monasteries has particularly changed the landscape of charity and care. For centuries, monasteries provided what little social safety net existed, offering food to the destitute, basic medical care, and shelter for travelers. With their closure, these services have largely disappeared, leaving communities to fend for themselves. For the sick or injured, options are few and often frightening. Physicians are available only to the wealthy, and their treatments, based on balancing the four humours of the body through bloodletting, purging and other interventions, are as likely to harm as help. Surgeons, often doubling as barbers, perform necessary operations without anaesthesia or antiseptics. Midwives deliver babies with no medical training beyond experience. Folk healers and wise women provide herbal remedies that sometimes work, sometimes don't, and sometimes lead to accusations of witchcraft. Speaking of witchcraft, fear of supernatural harm permeates Tudor life. Bad harvests, sudden illnesses, deformed livestock births, all might be blamed on witchcraft. While the great witch hunts are still in the future, the groundwork is being laid in the Tudor period. Henry VII's 1542 Witchcraft Act makes witchcraft a capital offence for the first time. Though the law is repealed 5 years later, the idea that witches deserve death takes root in the public mind. The most vulnerable to accusations are those on society's margins: elderly widows, women with knowledge of herbs and healing, the mentally ill, the deformed, or simply those who have quarrelled with neighbours. A reputation for ill temper or unusual behaviour might be enough to spark suspicion. You've heard whispers about Agnes Sampson, a Scottish midwife accused of raising storms to sink the ship carrying King James VI's bride. Under torture, she confessed to meeting with the devil and was burned at the stake. Scotland's witch trials are particularly severe, but England has its share as well. Your thoughts drift from these grim realities as sleep begins to claim you. Your body, exhausted from the day's labour, surrenders to the first sleep of the Tudor night. In a few hours, you'll wake briefly before returning to sleep until dawn, the segmented sleep pattern that feels entirely normal to you but would seem strange to modern people. The fire has died down to glowing embers. The house creaks and settles around you. Outside, night creatures go about their business. Mice scurrying, owls hunting, foxes prowling. Inside, human bodies rest and recover from one hard day, preparing for another. Tomorrow will bring more work, more dangers, more of the constant struggle that is Tudor survival. But for now, there's sleep. And in Tudor England, that's no small blessing. Your eyes open in the darkness. This is normal. You've completed your first sleep, and now comes that strange, peaceful time between sleeps that every Tudor knows well. The house is quiet, except for the soft breathing of others around you. Through cracks in the shutters, moonlight casts thin, silver lines across the room. You lie still, letting your mind wander in that particular way that comes only in these midnight hours. This wakeful period between first and second sleep is when Tudors often have their most profound thoughts, say their most heartfelt prayers, or engage in quiet conversation. It's a special time, almost sacred in its stillness, but tonight that stillness is broken by a wet, rasping cough from the grandmother. It sounds worse than before. In the dim light, you can just make out her form, shivering despite the blankets piled on her. You rise quietly, careful not to disturb others, and move to stoke the fire. A few embers still glow, and you add small kindling to bring the flames back to life. By this meagre light, you examine the old woman. Her skin is hot to the touch, her breathing laboured. These are bad signs. Tudor medicine offers few effective treatments for serious illness. The entire understanding of how the body works is based on theories that date back to ancient Greece and Rome, particularly the idea of the four humours that must be kept in balance: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When someone is ill, Tudor physicians believe that one of these humours has become excessive or corrupted. The treatments aim to restore balance, often by removing the excess humour. This leads to practices like bloodletting, purging, and induced vomiting, interventions that frequently weaken patients already struggling with disease. For the grandmother's fever and cough, a Tudor physician might prescribe bloodletting to reduce the hot humour they believe is causing the fever, but physicians are for the wealthy. For ordinary folk like you, healthcare comes from local wise women, from family remedies passed down through generations, or from apothecaries who sell herbal preparations. You decide to try a common Tudor remedy for fever, a tea made from willow bark. Unknown to you, this actually contains a chemical similar to aspirin and might genuinely help reduce the fever. You steep the bitter bark in hot water and help the old woman drink it. For the cough, you mix honey with a bit of vinegar, another remedy that has some basis in effectiveness. While you tend to the grandmother, you think about the more extreme medical practices of your time. Surgery is performed by barber surgeons, men who cut hair and perform bloodletting 1 minute, then amputate limbs the next. There's no anesthesia beyond alcohol or opium for those who can afford it, and no understanding of germs or infection. Surgeons operate in their everyday clothes, often wiping bloody hands on their aprons between procedures. Childbirth is perhaps the most dangerous medical event in a Tudor woman's life. It's handled exclusively by midwives. Men are forbidden from the birthing room by custom and sometimes by law. Some midwives are skilled and experienced, but they have no formal training and no way to deal with serious complications. Many women die in childbirth, and infant mortality is horrifically high. Even Henry VIII, with access to the best care available, lost many children in infancy. The grandmother seems to rest easier after your simple remedies. The willow bark tea has helped reduce her fever somewhat. You sit beside her for a while, watching the rise and fall of her chest. In Tudor England, caring for the sick is a family responsibility. There are no hospitals as we know them, though some towns have pest houses where victims of plague or other contagious diseases might be quarantined, often to die. You glance around at the other sleeping forms. Children, perhaps your own, curl together for warmth. Sleep, like everything else in Tudor life, is communal. The idea of private bedrooms for each family member is an unimaginable luxury. The children face dangers that would horrify modern parents. Child mortality is so high that many families don't even name infants until they've survived their first year. Children as young as 7 are put to work, performing tasks that match their strength and abilities. By 14, most are working full-time, whether in the fields, in trades as apprentices, or in domestic service. Many Tudor children are sent away from home to work as servants in other households. This practice cuts across class lines. Even the children of the gentry might be sent to serve in noble households to learn manners and make connections. For poorer families, having a child in service means one less mouth to feed at home and perhaps a small income from their wages. The fire flickers, casting dancing shadows on the wall. In the quiet of night, your mind turns to the wider world beyond your home. Henry VIII's reign has brought massive changes to England. His break with Rome has created religious tensions that affect every aspect of life. The king's dissolution of the monasteries has been particularly consequential for ordinary people. Monasteries weren't just religious institutions, they provided charity, education, and medical care. Their lands, now seized by the crown and often sold to wealthy nobles, had previously provided employment for many. Their disappearance has left gaps in the social fabric that nothing has filled. Religious practices that were central to community life for generations have been altered or forbidden. The veneration of saints, prayers for the dead, pilgrimages to holy sites, all these have been condemned as superstition. Parish churches have been stripped of their colourful decorations, whitewashed into stark simplicity. For many Tudors, these changes are deeply unsettling. Religion isn't just about Sunday worship, it structures their entire understanding of the world, from birth to death and everything in between. To have it changed by royal decree feels like having the ground shift beneath their feet. Some adapt easily to the new ways, others maintain old practices in secret, risking punishment if discovered. Many simply go along outwardly while harbouring private doubts or continuing traditional devotions behind closed doors. The grandmother stirs and murmurs something indistinct. You lean closer to hear, but she's not fully conscious, just talking in her fevered sleep. You adjust her blanket and return to your own bed, knowing that morning will come too soon and there's still work to be done after dawn. As you settle back onto your straw mattress, you notice the eastern sky beginning to lighten ever so slightly through a crack in the shutters. Dawn isn't far off. Your second sleep will be brief tonight. You close your eyes, but sleep is elusive now. Your mind is too full of worries about the grandmother, about the day's work ahead, about the larger uncertainties of life under a king whose religious policies change with his marriages. You think about food, wondering what the day's meals will bring. In early summer like now, there's the hungry gap, the difficult period when winter stores have run low but new crops aren't yet ready for harvest. It's a time of sparse meals for many Tudor households. The Tudor diet varies dramatically by social class and season. For the wealthy, meals are elaborate affairs with multiple courses. Meat dominates their tables: beef, venison, lamb, pork, and game birds in quantities that would shock modern nutritionists. Henry VIII's court consumes extraordinary amounts of meat, with records showing the royal household getting through 1,240 oxen, 8,200 sheep, 2,330 deer, 760 calves, 1,270 pigs, and 53 wild boar in just 1 year. For ordinary people like you, meat is an occasional luxury rather than a daily staple. Your protein comes more often from white meats, dairy products like cheese and eggs, than from actual meat. When meat does appear on your table, it's more likely to be bacon or small game like rabbits and birds than the brown meats enjoyed by the wealthy. Bread is the true staple of the Tudor diet for all classes, though its quality varies enormously. The poorest eat rough bread made from rye or barley, while the middling sort enjoy wheat bread, and the rich have fine white manchet bread made from sifted flour. Pottage, that ever-present thick soup or stew, appears at most Tudor meals for ordinary folk. It's a practical dish, able to stretch small amounts of ingredients to feed many mouths. Into the pot goes whatever is available: vegetables from the garden, grains, herbs, and perhaps scraps of meat or bacon for flavour. Vegetables are more important in the Tudor diet than many people realise. Cabbage, onions, leeks, garlic, turnips, carrots, peas and beans are widely grown and consumed. Salads made of greens and herbs are popular in season. Fruits like apples, pears, plums and berries are eaten fresh in summer and preserved for winter use. Sugar is known but expensive, used sparingly even by the wealthy. Honey is the more common sweetener for those who can afford it. Spices are another luxury, with pepper, ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg and cloves all imported at great expense. Ordinary cooking relies more on herbs grown in kitchen gardens: rosemary, thyme, sage, mint and parsley. As the first light of dawn begins to filter into the room, others start to stir. Another Tudor day begins with its labours, dangers and small pleasures. You rise, stiff from the hard bed, and check on the grandmother. Her fever seems slightly lower, but her breathing is still laboured. There's little more you can do except continue with the simple remedies and hope. Outside, the morning is bright and clear. Good weather for the day's work. In the garden, dew sparkles on the vegetables and herbs. This small plot is vital to your family's survival, providing much of your food. Tudor gardens are practical spaces focused on food production rather than ornamental plants. The garden contains the vegetables that form the basis of your diet: cabbages, onions, leeks, turnips and carrots. There are peas and beans growing up poles and salad greens like lettuce and spinach. A section is devoted to herbs, both culinary and medicinal: rosemary, thyme, sage and mint for cooking, feverfew, comfrey and chamomile for healing. If you're fortunate enough to have a bit more land, you might have fruit trees, apples, pears or plums, and perhaps bushes bearing currants, gooseberries or raspberries. Fruit is valued not just for eating fresh, but for preserving as jams or dried fruit to provide sweetness and vitamins through winter. As you move through your morning routine, stoking the fire, preparing a simple breakfast, checking on livestock if you have any, you're aware of the rhythms that govern Tudor life. These aren't just daily rhythms, but seasonal and annual ones as well. The agricultural year dictates much of Tudor life, especially in rural areas. Spring means planting and lambing, summer brings haymaking and sheep shearing, autumn is the busy harvest season, and winter is for threshing grain, repairing tools and equipment, and indoor work like spinning and weaving. Religious observances provide another calendar overlaid on the agricultural one. The church year begins with Advent, leading to the 12 days of Christmas. Then comes Candlemas, Lent, Easter, Whitsuntide, and a procession of saints' days and holy days throughout the year. Each has its traditions, foods, and sometimes fairs or markets associated with it. Henry VIII's religious reforms have altered some of these observances, eliminating many saints' days and changing certain practices, but the rhythm of the year, with its mixture of work and celebration, continues much as before. By mid-morning, you're deep into the day's labour. If you're a farmer, this might mean weeding crops, repairing fences, or tending animals. If you're a craftsperson, you're practising your trade: carpentry, blacksmithing, weaving, brewing, or any of the dozens of specialised crafts that make up the Tudor economy. Women's work is equally vital and equally demanding. Besides the gardening, cooking, cleaning and childcare that fall primarily to them, many Tudor women practice trades of their own. They might be brewers. Brewing was traditionally women's work before it became commercialised. Bakers, spinners, seamstresses or midwives. Widows often take over their husbands' businesses, becoming independent businesswomen in their own right. As the sun climbs higher, the day grows warmer. Summer in Tudor England can be pleasant, but it brings its own dangers. Without refrigeration, food spoils quickly in the heat. Milk turns sour within hours, meat attracts flies and begins to rot, bread develops mould. Preserving food through salting, smoking, pickling or drying is an essential skill. The heat also brings disease. The sweating sickness seems to prefer summer months for its deadly appearances. Other diseases like dysentery and typhus spread more easily in warm weather too. Water sources may grow stagnant and contaminated, increasing the risk of waterborne illness. Working through the heat is exhausting, but there's no alternative. The work must be done when conditions allow, regardless of comfort. You pause occasionally for water, perhaps from a well, a spring, or a barrel collecting rainwater. Clean water is precious, used carefully for drinking and cooking. Washing uses water of lower quality, perhaps from a nearby stream or pond. By midday, hunger draws you home or to whatever place you take your main meal. Dinner, as Tudors call this midday meal, is the largest of the day. For working people, it needs to provide enough energy for the afternoon's labour. Your dinner today might be bread with cheese, perhaps some salad greens from the garden dressed with a little vinegar, and pottage containing whatever vegetables are in season. If it's a special day, there might be a small piece of bacon or salt beef added to the pottage for flavour and protein. You eat with a knife and a spoon. Forks aren't common yet in Tudor England except among the very wealthy, and even they use them mainly for serving rather than eating. Your plate might be wood or perhaps pewter if you're prosperous. The poorest might use trenchers, pieces of stale bread that serve as edible plates. As you eat, you glance at the grandmother. She's awake but weak, managing only a few spoonfuls of pottage and a little watered ale. Her condition worries you. At her age, any serious illness could be fatal. The Tudor world is particularly harsh for the elderly, who have no pensions, no retirement homes, no social safety net beyond their families. After dinner, it's back to work for the afternoon. The sun is hot overhead now and sweat soaks your linen shirt. Tudor clothing is layered and often heavy by modern standards, especially for the better off who wear wool and even fur. Working folk dress more practically in linen and lighter wool, but still far more heavily than would be comfortable today. Your basic outfit consists of a linen shirt or shift worn next to the skin. This absorbs sweat and can be washed relatively frequently. Over this goes a woolen kirtle or doublet and hose or skirts, depending on your gender. These outer garments are rarely washed, just brushed and aired. Headwear is nearly universal. Women wear linen caps or coifs that cover their hair, while men wear woolen caps or felt hats. Shoes are made of leather with wooden soles, uncomfortable and inflexible by modern standards. Many working people, especially children, go barefoot in summer to save their shoes for winter when they're truly needed. The afternoon stretches long, filled with labour. Physical work is the lot of almost all Tudors except the highest nobility. Even merchants and professionals expect to engage in physical activity as part of their daily routine. The completely sedentary lifestyle of many modern people would be unimaginable and probably considered unhealthy in Tudor times. As you work, your mind might wander to news and gossip you've heard recently. Information travels slowly in Tudor England, carried by travellers, merchants and official messengers. There are no newspapers yet, though printed broadsheets announcing important events or sensational crimes sometimes circulate in towns. News from London takes days or weeks to reach distant parts of the kingdom. News from abroad might be months old by the time ordinary people hear it. This creates a curious time lag in awareness. Events that will prove historically momentous might be unknown to most people until long after they've occurred. But some news does filter down, particularly about the king and court. Henry VIII's marital troubles are common knowledge. How could they not be when they've led to such profound religious and political changes? His current wife, Catherine Parr, is his sixth, and Tudor gossip networks buzz with speculation about whether she'll survive where others didn't. Catherine Parr is known to have Protestant sympathies, which puts her at risk as Henry's religious policies have swung back toward traditional practices in recent years. The king's mood has grown more unpredictable as his health has declined. He suffers from an ulcerated leg that causes him constant pain, and he's gained enormous weight. The athletic young king of earlier years is now a bloated, irascible old man. You've heard rumours of factional struggles at court between conservative and reform-minded nobles, each trying to position themselves for the coming reign of Prince Edward, Henry's young son. Such high politics seems distant from your daily concerns, but experience has taught Tudors that changes at court can eventually affect even the humblest subjects. The afternoon begins to wane, the shadows lengthen, and the fierce heat of midday softens. You start to think about the evening meal, supper, and what tasks remain before you can rest. A sudden commotion draws your attention. Someone is shouting in the distance, and others are taking up the cry. Fire is one of the most dreaded disasters in Tudor communities, where wooden buildings with thatched roofs stand close together and firefighting equipment is primitive at best. You rush toward the noise, along with others from nearby. The scene that greets you is not a fire, thankfully, but still serious. A cart has overturned on the main road through the village. Its load, barrels of ale being transported to a nearby town, has spilled across the dusty road. The carter lies motionless beside his fallen vehicle, and the horse that pulled it is panicking, still partially in its harness. Several men rush to calm and free the horse, while others tend to the injured carter. He's alive but unconscious, with blood seeping from a gash on his head where he struck the ground or perhaps the cart itself as it fell. Transportation accidents are common and often deadly in Tudor England. Roads are unpaved, rutted and treacherous. Carts and wagons have no springs or other suspension, making for a bone-jarring ride even on good roads. Horses, oxen and other draft animals can be unpredictable, and there are no safety standards for vehicles or harness equipment. The carter is carried to the nearest house while someone runs to fetch the local healer. His prospects are uncertain. Head injuries can be fatal, and Tudor medicine has little to offer beyond basic wound cleaning and bandaging. If he survives, he may face the loss of his livelihood. If he's unable to work, there's no disability insurance or compensation for injuries. The spilled ale is another tragedy of sorts. It represents a significant financial loss for someone, perhaps the carter himself, perhaps the brewer who hired him, perhaps the innkeeper expecting the delivery. In the Tudor economy, such losses can be devastating. Most people operate with thin margins, carrying debt and dependent on each transaction for survival. As the excitement dies down and the injured man is taken care of as best as possible, you return to your own concerns. The incident is a stark reminder of how quickly disaster can strike in Tudor life, how thin the line is between routine and catastrophe. You check on the grandmother again before the evening meal. She seems no worse, but no better either. You prepare another willow bark tea and help her drink it, along with some watered ale to keep her strength up. In your mind, you're already calculating how long you can maintain this care while still managing your other responsibilities. The Tudor work ethic allows little room for extended caregiving. Supper is a simple affair. Bread, cheese, perhaps some cold pottage left from dinner. As the summer sun finally begins to set, quite late at this time of year in England's northern latitude, you finish the day's tasks and prepare once more for night. The fire is banked carefully. Fire safety is a constant concern in Tudor households. Embers can easily escape and ignite thatch or timber, and a house fire can quickly spread to an entire village. Many communities maintain rudimentary firefighting equipment, buckets, ladders and hooks for pulling down burning thatch, and have established procedures for responding to fires. Before settling into bed, you take a moment to step outside and look at the twilight sky. The stars are beginning to appear brighter and more numerous than modern people ever see through light-polluted skies. For Tudors, the night sky is both familiar and mysterious. Canvas for religious belief, astrological supposition, and practical timekeeping. You know some of the constellations and what they signify for planting or navigation. You've heard theories about what stars actually are, perhaps holes in the celestial sphere showing the light of heaven beyond, or perhaps fiery bodies like the sun, but much smaller and more distant. The truth is beyond Tudor science to determine. The evening air is cool after the day's heat, carrying the sense of ripening crops, cooking fires, and the ever-present organic aromas of a pre-industrial community. Somewhere, someone is playing a pipe or tabor, simple music to end the day. You return inside to join your family and household in the communal bed. Tomorrow will bring more work, more dangers, more of the constant struggle that defines Tudor life. But for tonight, there's the comfort of familiar bodies, the softness of even a straw mattress to tired muscles, and the promise of rest. As you settle in, listening to the grandmother's laboured breathing and the quieter respiration of the others around you, you reflect on your place in this Tudor world. It's a hard life by modern standards, physically demanding, filled with disease and danger, lacking most of the comforts we take for granted. But it's the only life you know, and it has its satisfactions. The rhythm of seasons, the accomplishment of necessary work, the bonds of family and community. You drift toward your first sleep as darkness fills the room completely. Outside, an owl calls and something small scurries beneath the eaves. The summer night has begun, bringing its own set of Tudor experiences, different from but no less real than those of day. Morning comes again as it always does. Your eyes open to the pale light filtering through the cracks in the shutters. Another Tudor day begins. Your first thought is of the grandmother. You turn to check on her and find her awake, her eyes clearer than yesterday. The fever seems to have broken during the night. She's still weak, but there's improvement. The simple remedies and her own resilience have bought her more time at least. Relief washes over you. Death is an everyday companion in Tudor England, but that doesn't make losing family any easier. The grandmother is the repository of family knowledge, herbal remedies, weather signs, old stories, practical skills passed down through generations. Her loss would be not just emotional, but practical too. You rise and begin the day's routine again. Light the fire, prepare a simple breakfast, ready yourself for work. But today, there's a difference. It's market day in the nearest town, and you need to go. Perhaps once a week or once a month, depending on the distance. Tudor people make the journey to market towns to buy, sell, and barter. The walk to town might be a mile or two, or it might be many miles if you live in a remote area. Roads are poor, unpaved dirt tracks that turn to mud in rain and dust in drought. There are no signposts or maps. You navigate by landmarks and local knowledge. Walking these roads carries risks. Highwaymen are a genuine threat, especially for those known to be carrying money or goods. More common dangers include simple accidents. A twisted ankle on uneven ground can leave you stranded and vulnerable, or getting lost if fog or darkness descends. But today, the weather is fair, and you're travelling a familiar route. Others from your village are making the same journey, some driving carts with produce to sell, others like you on foot. There's safety in numbers, and the group moves together, conversation making the journey pass more quickly. As you approach the town, the road becomes busier. Farmers drive livestock to market. Sheep, cattle, pigs, the animals add to the traffic and the mess on the road. You step carefully to avoid the fresh dung. The smell grows stronger as you near the town. Not just animal waste, but human too, along with the distinctive odours of tanning, butchery, brewing, and other urban trades. The town itself is small by modern standards, but seems bustling and crowded to rural eyes. Buildings press close together along narrow streets. Most are timber-framed with wattle and daub infill, many with upper stories that project out over the street, making the thoroughfares seem even narrower and darker. Market day transforms the town's central square. Stalls and tables display goods of all kinds, vegetables, fruits, grains and livestock from surrounding farms, cloth, leather goods, pottery and metalwork from local craftspeople, and more exotic items brought by merchants from further afield. Spices, fine textiles, books for those who can read, jewellery for those who can afford it. The market is more than just a place of commerce. It's where news and gossip spread, where proclamations are read, where criminals might be publicly punished in the stocks or pillory. It's a social centre as much as an economic one. You have specific tasks at the market. Perhaps you're selling surplus produce from your garden or eggs from your chickens. Perhaps you're buying necessities that can't be produced at home. Salt, metal tools, cloth. Perhaps you're seeking specific herbs for the grandmother's recovery. Whatever your purpose, you navigate the crowded square with the practiced eye of someone who knows the value of things and the art of bargaining. Money in Tudor England is complex. There are gold coins, angels and nobles for large transactions, silver coins, shillings, groats and pennies for everyday purchases, and copper coins, farthings, for the smallest exchanges. Most ordinary people deal primarily in pennies and farthings. A skilled labourer might earn 6 to 8 pence per day, while an unskilled worker gets 3 to 4 pence. A pound of butter costs about 3 pence, a chicken 2 pence, a pound of cheese 2 to 3 pence. But much economic activity happens without money changing hands at all. Barter is common, especially in rural areas. Labour is exchanged for goods, one type of produce for another. Credit arrangements between neighbours and within communities help smooth out the ups and downs of seasonal income. As you move through the market, you're aware of the social hierarchy visible all around you. Clothing instantly marks people's status. The wealthy wear silk, fine wool, and fur in bright colours made with expensive dyes. Their garments are embellished with embroidery, slashing, and pinking, decorative cuts that reveal contrasting fabric beneath. Sumptuary laws theoretically restrict who can wear what, reserving certain fabrics, colours and decorations for specific social ranks. Purple silk is for royalty only, velvet and satin for the nobility and wealthiest merchants, and so on down the scale. In practice, these laws are difficult to enforce, and the aspiring middle classes often push the boundaries. Your own clothing is practical rather than fashionable, sturdy wool and linen in natural or inexpensively dyed colours. But even at the lower economic levels, there's concern for appearance. Your best outfit, reserved for church and special occasions, has small touches that show care and pride, perhaps a bit of embroidery on a collar or a slightly better quality of cloth. As you pass the church, you notice activity around its doors. A group of poor people, some elderly, some disabled, some simply destitute, wait for the daily distribution of alms. Before Henry VIII's religious reforms, monasteries provided much of this charity. With their dissolution, parish churches have taken on more of the burden, but resources are stretched thin. Tudor attitudes toward poverty are complex and changing. Traditional Christian teaching emphasizes the virtue of charity and the spiritual value of giving to the poor, but there's also increasing distinction between the deserving and undeserving poor, those who cannot work versus those who, supposedly, will not. The Tudor Poor Laws, beginning with an act in 1536, increasingly regulate and institutionalise poor relief. Each parish becomes responsible for its own poor, raising funds through a mandatory poor rate levied on property owners. The old, sick and disabled receive outdoor relief, money or necessities while remaining in their own homes. Orphans and abandoned children are apprenticed to learn trades. The able-bodied poor are set to work, with refusal punishable by whipping or imprisonment. Begging without license is criminalized, reflecting growing fears about vagrancy and social disorder. Sturdy beggars, able-bodied homeless people, face harsh punishments including whipping, branding, enslavement, and even execution for repeat offences. The dissolution of the monasteries has increased the numbers of displaced and desperate people on the roads, fueling these fears. You pass by the town's jail, a small, grim building where accused criminals await trial or convicted ones serve short sentences. For serious crimes, jail is merely a prelude to corporal or capital punishment, not a punishment in itself. Tudor justice is swift and severe by modern standards. There are over 200 capital offences, including not just murder and treason, but also theft of items worth more than a few shillings, poaching the king's deer, and various forms of fraud and counterfeiting. Public punishment is designed to shame and deter. Minor offenders might be placed in the stocks or pillory, exposed to public ridicule and abuse. More serious criminals face whipping, branding, or mutilation before execution. Execution itself is public and often elaborately cruel, especially for treason, which merits hanging, drawing, and quartering for men or burning for women. Despite this severity, or perhaps because of it, Tudor England has no professional police force. Law enforcement relies on ordinary citizens serving as constables and watchmen, and on the hue and cry, the obligation of all who witness a crime to raise an alarm and join in pursuit of the criminal. Turning away from these grim thoughts, you complete your market business and prepare for the journey home. Your purchases are wrapped in cloth or stuffed into a sack to carry. If you've sold produce or goods, you have a few coins or perhaps items acquired in trade. The walk back feels longer, your feet tired and your arms burdened with your market purchases, but there's satisfaction in successful errands and the anticipation of sharing market news with those at home. The countryside looks different in the afternoon light. Fields of grain ripple in the breeze, approaching harvest time. The narrow track winds between hedgerows full of birds and small animals. This landscape has been shaped by centuries of human habitation and agriculture, yet much of it would still be recognizable to modern eyes, especially in the more remote regions. One change that is reshaping the Tudor countryside, invisible day to day but significant over time, is the enclosure movement. Common lands that were traditionally available to all villagers for grazing animals or gathering firewood are increasingly being enclosed by hedges or fences and claimed as private property by landowners. This enclosure accelerates during the Tudor period as raising sheep for wool becomes more profitable than growing crops. Large landowners convert arable fields to sheep pasture, which requires far fewer workers. The result is displacement for many rural families, who lose both access to common resources and opportunities for agricultural work. As you walk, you notice a small group gathered by the roadside, looking at something on the ground. Curious, you approach and find them examining a dead bird, a crow or raven. One old man is shaking his head gravely. "Bad omen that," he mutters. "Crow falling dead from the sky like that. Mark my words, there'll be trouble coming." Folk beliefs and superstitions permeate Tudor daily life, existing alongside and sometimes intertwining with formal religion. Signs and omens are taken seriously, from the flight patterns of birds to unusual weather to dreams and bodily sensations. These aren't seen as contradicting Christianity, but as part of God's communication with the world. You're not sure you believe the dead crow foretells disaster, but you find yourself making a small sign to ward off ill luck anyway. Such gestures are second nature in a world where the boundary between natural and supernatural seems much thinner than it does to modern minds. The conversation turns to other recent strange occurrences: a calf born with two heads on a nearby farm, an unseasonable frost that damaged fruit blossoms, a mysterious light seen in the churchyard at night. Each might have a natural explanation, but each also carries potential supernatural meaning in the Tudor worldview. This blend of practical observation and mystical interpretation characterizes much of Tudor thought. It's visible in medicine, where herbal remedies based on generations of empirical observation coexist with treatments derived from astrological principles or the doctrine of signatures, the belief that plants resembling body parts can cure ailments of those parts. It appears in agriculture too, where genuinely useful practices like crop rotation and careful seed selection operate alongside planting by the phases of the moon and ritual protections against blight, and it shapes responses to disasters like plague, which might be simultaneously understood as a result of miasma, bad air, divine punishment, and malevolent witchcraft. Continuing your journey, you pass a small shrine by the roadside, a niche containing a weathered statue of a saint with a few wildflowers placed before it. Such shrines were once common throughout England, but many have been destroyed or left to decay since Henry VIII's religious reforms condemned veneration of saints as superstitious. This one has survived, and clearly some locals still maintain it secretly. The persistence of Catholic practices, despite their official prohibition, creates another layer of tension in Tudor society. Outward conformity with the established church is required by law, but private beliefs and practices are harder to regulate. The extent of religious enforcement varies with the monarch's own inclinations and the zealousness of local authorities. Under Edward VI, Protestant reforms will accelerate. Under Mary I, Catholicism will be restored with brutal persecution of Protestants. Under Elizabeth I, a moderate Protestantism will be established with varying degrees of tolerance for those who quietly maintain Catholic practices. For ordinary Tudor people, these shifts in official religion create practical as well as spiritual dilemmas. Do you risk using your rosary beads in private prayer? Do you teach your children the old prayers or the new? Do you hide the religious images that once adorned your home, hoping someday to display them again or destroy them to avoid suspicion? As you near your home village, the smoke from cooking fires rises straight up in the still evening air. The familiar sight brings comfort after the busy market day. However harsh and dangerous Tudor life may be, there's security in the known, in familiar places and faces, in established routines. The market purchases will make dinner more interesting tonight. Perhaps there's a bit of salt pork or dried fish to add to the pottage, or some honey for a sweet treat. Small luxuries by modern standards, but significant in the Tudor context where variety in diet is limited by seasonality, preservation methods, and economics. Your thoughts turn to the grandmother and her illness. The herbs you purchased at market should help with her recovery. Horehound for the cough, valerian to help her sleep, perhaps some saffron if you could afford such an expensive spice. Tudor medicine relies heavily on herbal remedies, many of which do contain pharmacologically active compounds. But medicine is inseparable from folk belief and religion. Along with the herbs, there might be prayers, charms, or rituals to aid healing. A particular saint might be invoked for specific ailments. St. Blaise for throat problems, St. Apollonia for toothache, St. Agatha for breast diseases. Despite official prohibition, many Tudors continue these invocations privately. As you walk the final stretch toward home, you reflect on the day's experiences and the larger Tudor world they represent. It's a world of stark contrasts between wealth and poverty, health and disease, security and vulnerability, official doctrine and private belief. It's a world in transition too, though this is less visible in daily life. The seeds of what will become modern England are being planted in Tudor soil. Religious reformation, the rise of commerce, changes in land use, early stirrings of scientific thought, all are reshaping society in ways that contemporaries can only dimly perceive. For you and most ordinary Tudors, these grand historical processes matter less than the immediate realities of survival. Will the harvest be good enough to avoid hunger in winter? Will disease spare your household this year? Will political and religious changes make life easier or harder? These are the questions that occupy Tudor minds. You reach your home as the sun begins to set. The grandmother is sitting up, looking notably better than when you left this morning. Children play in the dirt yard, a dog barking excitedly around them. Smoke rises from the chimney, promising warmth and food inside. This humble scene, a small Tudor household at day's end, represents both the hardships and the resilience of ordinary people in this challenging era. Life is precarious, comfort is minimal by modern standards, and death is never far away. Yet there's also community, purpose, and moments of simple joy. You step through the low doorway into the single room that serves as kitchen, living area, and bedroom for your entire household. The familiar smells greet you: wood smoke, cooking food, the earthy scent of the rush-strewn floor, the indefinable but recognizable smell of home. Someone has prepared a pot of pottage, which bubbles over the fire. You unpack your market purchases, each item a small triumph of economy or bartering skill. The household gathers around as you distribute them. A bit of salt, some spices, perhaps a length of ribbon or a small knife or other practical item. Market day also brings news from beyond the village. You share what you've heard, rumours of events at court, reports of weather or harvest conditions elsewhere, gossip about neighbouring communities. In a world without mass media, such person-to-person transmission is how information spreads, albeit slowly and with frequent distortion. The most reliable news comes via official proclamations read aloud at market crosses and in parish churches. These announce new laws, taxes, or religious requirements straight from the government in London. They're copied by scribes and dispatched throughout the kingdom, creating one of the few standardized sources of information available to all. As dinner is served, the enhanced pottage, bread, perhaps cheese or eggs, conversation continues. Tudor mealtimes are social occasions, opportunities for family members to share experiences and knowledge. There's little privacy in the one-room house, but there's companionship to compensate. The meal is eaten from wooden bowls using spoons and knives but no forks. Forks exist in Tudor England but are rare luxury items used mainly for serving, not eating. Most people eat with a combination of utensils and fingers, with a shared sense of appropriate table manners, despite the absence of modern implements. After the meal, there might be time for simple recreation before darkness makes most activities impractical. Children play with homemade toys, wooden hoops, rag dolls, tops and marbles. Adults might engage in conversation, storytelling, or simple games like cards, dice, or Nine Men's Morris, a board game played since medieval times. Music is another common pastime. Even humble households might have a pipe, tabor, small drum, or whistle. Songs are part of everyday life, accompanying work and celebrations. Ballads tell stories of love, adventure, and current events, spreading both entertainment and information. The evening draws on, and thoughts turn towards sleep again. The fire is banked, evening prayers are said, and the household prepares for bed. The shared sleeping platform with its straw mattress awaits, offering rest for bodies tired from the day's exertions. As you settle in for the night, surrounded by family, your mind drifts to tomorrow. There will be more work, more challenges, more of the constant effort required simply to exist in Tudor England. But there will also be small pleasures, moments of connection, the satisfaction of skills well used. This is the reality of Tudor life for ordinary people, not the glittering court pageantry or momentous political events that dominate history books, but the daily, unglamorous business of survival. It's a hard life by modern standards, but it's also the only life you know filled with its own kinds of meaning and value. Outside, an owl calls in the gathering darkness. Inside, the breathing of your household creates a gentle rhythm. The grandmother's breathing is easier tonight, a small victory against the precariousness of Tudor existence. Tomorrow will bring its own triumphs and defeats in the ongoing struggle that is life in Tudor England. Morning arrives with a commotion. Before the sun has fully risen, there's shouting outside. You jolt awake, instantly alert. Sudden noises rarely herald good news in Tudor England. You rush to the door and open it to find several neighbours gathered, faces grim. There's been a theft in the village during the night. Someone broke into the miller's storage and stole a quantity of flour, a serious crime in a world where food security is precarious and theft of valuable goods can be punishable by death. The village constable is organising a search. In Tudor England, there's no professional police force. Law enforcement relies on ordinary men serving as parish constables on a rotating basis. It's an unpaid, often thankless position that most try to avoid, but someone must maintain order and investigate crimes. The constable has the authority to search properties, question suspects and make arrests, but he has no special training or weapons beyond what any citizen might possess. He relies on the cooperation of the community and the principle of the hue and cry, the legal obligation of all able-bodied men to assist in pursuing criminals when called upon. You join the search party, as is expected of any able-bodied man. The flour thief might be someone from the village driven by hunger, or perhaps an outsider passing through. Either way, the consequences could be severe if they're caught. Petty theft might result in whipping or time in the stocks, but theft of valuable goods, and flour certainly qualifies in a subsistence economy, could lead to hanging. Tudor justice is swift and harsh by modern standards. Trials at the quarterly assizes or more frequent quarter sessions are brief affairs, often lasting just minutes per case. There are no police investigations, forensic evidence, or professional defense attorneys. Cases rely on witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and the defendant's own words. Many accused stand trial without any legal representation. For minor offences, local justices of the peace handle cases even more summarily. These JPs are typically wealthy landowners with no legal training, appointed by the Crown to maintain order in their communities. Their jurisdiction includes vagabonds, moral offences, minor thefts, and public disorder. The flour thief is not found during the morning's search, though footprints leading into the forest suggest someone from outside the village. The constable organises a watch for the coming night in case the thief returns. The incident has left everyone uneasy. Crime threatens not just individual victims, but the social fabric that makes survival possible in the challenging Tudor world. After the excitement dies down, the day settles into its usual rhythm, but there's a special quality to today. It's St. John's Eve, June 23rd, one of the many holy days and festivals that punctuate the Tudor year. Tonight there will be bonfires and celebrations marking Midsummer, a Christian festival overlaid on earlier pagan observances of the summer solstice. Such festivals provide welcome breaks from the constant labour of Tudor life. The church calendar creates a rhythm of work and celebration, with feast days, saints' days, and major religious observances like Christmas and Easter offering opportunities for communal gathering, special foods, and temporary respite from toil. Henry VIII's religious reforms have eliminated some of these traditional celebrations, condemning them as superstitious or papist, but many persist, sometimes with their religious significance downplayed or reinterpreted to fit the new orthodoxy. The basic human need for festivity and community remains regardless of theological shifts. As you go about your daily tasks, there's a sense of anticipation for the evening's bonfire. Children are gathering wood and flowers for the celebration. Young people exchange knowing glances, aware that St. John's Eve is traditionally associated with courtship rituals and fortune-telling about future marriages. These folk customs exist alongside official religion in the Tudor mind without much sense of contradiction. Christianity, as practiced by ordinary people, incorporates many elements from earlier beliefs and cultural traditions. The bonfires of St. John's Eve are believed to ward off evil spirits, while also serving the practical purpose of community gathering and celebration. By midday, your work takes you near the village church. The building itself reflects the religious changes sweeping England, where once colourful paintings of saints and biblical scenes covered the walls. Now there is whitewash. Statues have been removed, stained glass windows broken, and replaced with plain glass in some places. Inside, the elaborate rood screen that once separated the nave from the chancel has been torn down, reflecting the Protestant emphasis on direct access to God without priestly mediation. The altar has been replaced by a communion table, now placed lengthwise in the church rather than against the east wall, another symbolic change emphasizing the communal meal aspect of communion over its sacrificial interpretation. These physical changes mirror the theological ones imposed from above. The Latin Mass has given way to English-language services. Elaborate vestments have been simplified. Prayers for the dead, veneration of saints, and belief in purgatory have been officially condemned, though many continue these practices privately. For ordinary people, these changes are not just matters of abstract theology, but disruptions to the rhythms and certainties of life. Rituals that once marked birth, marriage, death, and the changing seasons must be adapted or abandoned. Communities split between those who embrace reform and those who cling to tradition. Families divide along religious lines. The personal becomes political in ways few could have imagined a generation earlier. You notice the parish priest moving around the churchyard, preparing for evening prayers. His position is complicated in these changing times. If he's an older man, he was ordained as a Catholic priest but has had to adapt to the new ways or lose his living. If younger, he's been trained in the Reformed faith but serves a community where many still hold to older beliefs and practices. The priest's authority has changed too. Once he was the unquestioned spiritual leader of the parish, a mediator between the people and God. Now his role is more that of a teacher and preacher, explaining the scriptures that increasingly literate parishioners can read for themselves in English translations. Literacy is growing in Tudor England, though still limited compared to modern levels. Perhaps 30% of men and 10% of women can read by the end of the period, concentrated in urban areas and upper social classes. The printing press, introduced to England in the late 15th century, has made books more affordable and accessible, though still luxury items for most. The Bible in English is the most significant printed work for most Tudor people who can read. First legally published in 1539 under Henry VIII, every parish church is required to have a copy available for public reading. For many, hearing these scriptures in their own language rather than Latin is revolutionary, bringing religious texts alive in new ways. Other printed materials circulate too: almanacs predicting weather and astrological influences, broadsheets announcing news or sensational crimes, pamphlets arguing religious and political positions, practical guides to farming or household management. This emerging print culture begins to create more standardized information across the kingdom, though oral transmission remains dominant for most. Education is also expanding beyond the traditional preserves of the church and nobility. Grammar schools, often founded with money from dissolved monasteries, provide Latin-based education for boys from middle-class families. Some towns establish petty schools, teaching basic literacy and numeracy to both boys and girls. Apprenticeships offer practical education in trades and crafts. For most children, however, education remains informal and practical, learning by doing alongside parents and other adults. Girls learn household management, food preparation, textile skills, and basic medicine. Boys learn farming, crafts, or their father's trade. Both absorb the social and religious values of their community through observation and instruction. As afternoon deepens toward evening, preparations for the St. John's Eve celebration continue. Special foods are being prepared, perhaps strawberries, the quintessential fruit of English summer, or special bread marked with a cross. Medicinal herbs gathered on this day are believed to have enhanced potency, and many women collect them for their household pharmacopoeia. The grandmother, now recovering well from her illness, supervises younger women in these preparations. Her knowledge of which herbs to gather and how to preserve them is invaluable. This transmission of practical knowledge from generation to generation is how Tudor society maintains and builds its collective wisdom in the absence of formal educational institutions for most people. As the sun begins to set, the community gathers on the village green where the bonfire has been built. There's an air of excitement, especially among the young. Music begins, perhaps a pipe and tabor player, or a group with a fiddle, drum and woodwind instruments. Dancing will follow once the bonfire is lit. Tudor music and dance differ from what we know today. The instruments are simpler, but played with skill passed down through generations. Dance forms include circle and line dances, where everyone can participate regardless of skill level. More complex dances are known to those with leisure to learn them, particularly the gentry who might imitate court dances on a simplified scale. The bonfire is lit as darkness falls and cheers rise from the gathered villagers. The flames leap high, casting flickering light on faces both young and old. In this moment, the hardships of Tudor life recede somewhat. There's warmth, community, celebration, things that transcend the specific historical period and connect to universal human experiences. Children run and play games in the firelight. Older people sit and talk, sharing drinks and food. Young men and women eye each other across the flames, perhaps engaging in the courtship rituals traditional to this night. Midsummer has long been associated with love and fertility. Its position halfway through the year making it a natural time for thinking about future partnerships. Tudor courtship has its own rules and customs, varying somewhat by social class and region. For ordinary people, the process is relatively straightforward compared to the elaborate courtship rituals of the nobility. Couples meet at church, at markets, at festivals like this one, they talk dance, perhaps exchange small gifts or tokens. Parents and community have significant input into marriage choices, viewing matrimony as an economic and social alliance as much as a personal relationship. But there's also recognition of the importance of some degree of compatibility and mutual consent. The ideal is a partnership that works both emotionally and practically in the business of survival. As the celebration continues, you notice a stranger at the edge of the gathering, a man in travel-stained clothes, watching the festivities with interest. Travellers are common enough on the roads of Tudor England. They might be merchants, peddlers selling small goods from village to village, labourers seeking work, or pilgrims visiting shrines, though the latter have decreased since Henry's religious reforms. This particular traveller seems harmless enough, and someone eventually offers him a drink and a place by the fire. Hospitality to strangers is both a Christian virtue and a practical custom in a world where anyone might need shelter when travelling. In return, travellers bring news, stories and connections to the wider world beyond the village boundaries. And that world is expanding in ways that few ordinary Tudors fully comprehend. During Henry VIII's reign, English explorers have begun venturing across the Atlantic, following in the wake of Spanish and Portuguese expeditions. John Cabot reached Newfoundland in 1497. The concept of a new world is entering English consciousness, though its full implications remain unclear to most. Closer to home, England's relationships with European powers shift constantly through alliances, conflicts, and Henry's marital diplomacy. France and Spain are the major powers that English foreign policy must navigate between. Scotland remains an independent kingdom with its own complex relationship to England, often hostile but sometimes allied. The traveller at your village bonfire might have tales of these larger political events filtered through rumour and elaboration. He might have heard news from London more recent than anything known locally. He might have stories of strange customs from distant parts of England itself, or songs popular in other regions. As the night deepens, the bonfire burns lower. Older people and young children drift home to bed, while the more energetic continue celebrating. The mood is relaxed now, warmed by fire, food, drink, and company. These moments of communal joy are the counterbalance to the many hardships of Tudor life. You stay late, enjoying the rare opportunity for leisure. When you finally return home, the single room is dark except for the banked fire's glow. The grandmother is already asleep, her breathing steady and much improved. Children are curled in their usual spots on the shared sleeping platform. The familiar scene brings comfort after the stimulation of the celebration. As you prepare for sleep, your mind wanders to the wider Tudor world beyond your immediate experience. What would it be like to live in London, with its tens of thousands of inhabitants, its royal palaces, its bustling commercial districts? What would it be like to be at court among the nobles competing for royal favour? What would it be like to sail on one of those ships venturing across the Atlantic to lands barely imagined? These thoughts aren't envy or ambition so much as natural human curiosity. Tudor society is highly stratified with limited social mobility. Most people live and die in circumstances similar to those they were born into. Yet there's always awareness of other lives, other possibilities, even if they seem as distant as the stars. The night is quiet now, except for the soft sounds of sleeping people and the occasional pop from the fire. Outside, the village has returned to its normal stillness. The St. John's Eve bonfire has burned down to embers, though a watch will be kept to ensure it doesn't spread. Tomorrow, ordinary life resumes with its constant work and challenges. This is the rhythm of Tudor existence, the daily struggle for survival punctuated by moments of celebration and community. It's a hard life by modern standards, filled with physical discomfort, constant labour, disease and early death. Yet it's also a life rich in human connection, practical knowledge and engagement with the natural world in ways modern people rarely experience. As you drift towards sleep, you carry these contradictions within you, the hardship and the joy, the limitations and the possibilities, the suffering and the resilience. This is what it means to be Tudor, to live in this particular slice of human history with its unique challenges and consolations. Your eyes grow heavy as exhaustion overtakes you. The straw mattress, so uncomfortable to modern sensibilities, feels welcoming to your work-weary body. The shared warmth of family provides both physical and emotional comfort in the darkness. Sleep comes easily, as it usually does for those who labour from dawn to dusk. In your dreams, perhaps you'll visit those distant places and different lives you wondered about. Perhaps you'll relive the bonfire celebration with its music and dancing. Perhaps you'll process the concerns of Tudor existence, the uncertain harvest, the religious changes, the ever-present threat of disease or accident. When you wake, it will be to another Tudor day with its labours and dangers, but for now there's the blessed respite of sleep, that universal human experience that connects people across centuries, whether on a feather bed in a royal palace or a straw mattress in a humble cottage. All Tudors, like all humans before and since, surrender to sleep and its restorative powers. The Tudor world fades as you sink deeper into slumber. The physical discomforts, the hard bed, the smoky air, the sounds of others nearby recede from consciousness. What remains is the fundamental human experience of rest, unchanged across the centuries, despite all the differences in circumstance. And in this way, the people of Tudor England were not so different from us after all. They loved, they feared, they worked, they celebrated, they slept. Their world was harsher in many ways, their lives more precarious, their comforts fewer, but their essential humanity, their hopes, dreams, and basic needs mirror our own across the gulf of time. As your awareness of the Tudor night fades, replaced by the gentle void of deep sleep, remember this connection that spans the centuries. The details of daily life may change dramatically, but the core experiences of being human remain remarkably constant. And with that thought, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.